Lost in the Amazon, the desperate fight of three survivors country of origin Brazil. When the small Cessna 172 piloted by Carlos Mendoza crashes in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. During a storm, three completely different people must join. Forces to survive. Marina, a doctor from Sao Paulo on her first trip to the Amazon. Roberto, an experienced local tour guide. And Carlos himself, a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience. Face 72 hours of terror, discoveries, and overcoming. In one of the planet's most hostile regions, between dangerous animals, tropical diseases, lack of potable water, and the constant threat of the forest, they will discover that the greatest battle is not just against nature, but against their own fears and limitations. The roar of the Cessna 172's engine echoed over the infinite green canopy of the Amazon rainforest. When the first raindrops began hitting the windshield, Carlos Mendoza, a 52-year-old pilot with 3 decades of experience flying over the Amazon, frowned as he observed the dark clouds forming rapidly ahead. Looks like we're going to have some turbulence, Carlos announced over the intercom, his calm voice masking growing concern. Fasten your seat belts. In the passenger seat, Marina Oliveira, a 34-year-old doctor from Sao Paulo, nervously gripped her backpack strap. It was her first trip to the Amazon, part of a tropical medicine project that would take her to a remote indigenous village. Her brown eyes reflected a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she observed the green vastness stretching to the horizon. Dr. Carlos, how much longer until we arrive? Marina asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her stomach churning from the increasing turbulence. About 40 minutes, if the weather cooperates, Carlos replied, adjusting the controls as the plane rocked violently. In the back seat, Roberto Silva, a 41-year-old tour guide born and raised in the region, watched the clouds with an experienced eye. Son of river dwellers, Roberto knew the forest's signs like few others. His dark skin was marked by decades of work under the Amazon sun, and his dark eyes showed a concern he tried to hide from the passengers. Carlos, I don't like these clouds at all, Roberto murmured, leaning forward. Looks like a strong storm is coming. Before Carlos could respond, lightning illuminated the dark sky, immediately followed by deafening thunder. The plane was shaken violently, as if a giant hand had grabbed and shaken it. Marina screamed, clutching her seat, while Roberto crossed himself discreetly. Damn! Carlos fought with the controls, his muscles tensed as he tried to keep the plane stable. We're going to have to detour around the storm, but it was too late. Another lightning bolt cut through the sky, this time dangerously close to the plane. The electrical system flickered, and for a terrifying moment, the engine sputtered. Carlos, Marina screamed, her voice cutting through the storm's noise. Calm down, calm down. Carlos shouted back, his hands flying over the controls. Just a temporary failure, I can manage. The engine died. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any noise. For a few eternal seconds, the only sound was the wind whistling against the windshield and the heavy breathing of the 3 occupants. Mayday, mayday. Carlos shouted into the radio, his voice finally showing the panic he felt. This is Cessna PTABC. We have total engine failure over the Amazon rainforest. We're going down, mayday. Only static responded. Roberto looked out the window and saw the treetops approaching rapidly. Carlos, how much time do we have? 2 minutes, maybe 3, Carlos replied, sweat running down his face as he desperately tried to restart the engine. I'm going to attempt an emergency landing, but what? Marina asked, her voice trembling. There are no clearings large enough around here. We're going to have to try to land in the trees and hope they cushion the fall. Marina felt her blood freeze. As a doctor, she knew exactly what that meant. Roberto, do you know this area? I do, doctor. We're over the Tapajos River region, one of the densest parts of the forest. If we survive the crash, he didn't finish the sentence. When we survive, Carlos corrected, his voice regaining some authority. Listen, you two, When I say so, assume the emergency position. Heads down, arms protecting your necks. Marina, you have medical training. We're going to need that. Asterisk. The plane continued descending. The treetops now clearly visible through the windows. Carlos managed to identify a slightly less dense area and directed the plane toward it. Asterisk. Here we go. Carlos shouted. Emergency position. Now. Asterisk. All three bent over, protecting their heads and necks with their arms. Marina murmured a prayer she hadn't said in years. While Roberto thought of his wife and children at home, Carlos, with all his experience, knew the chances of survival were minimal. Asterisk. The first impact was with the treetops. Branches and leaves exploded against the windshield, and the plane was violently shaken from side to side. The metal groaned and twisted as the aircraft carved its way through the dense vegetation. Asterisk. The second impact was with a thick trunk. The right wing shattered, and the plane spun uncontrollably before hitting another set of trees. Asterisk. The third and final impact was with the forest floor. Asterisk. Marina woke up with the taste of blood in her mouth and a sharp pain in her head. It took a few seconds to remember where she was and what had happened. The plane was on its side, partially buried in leaves and branches. Filtered sunlight entered through holes in what remained of the windshield. Asterisk. Roberto. Carlos. Her voice came out hoarse and weak. Asterisk. A groan responded from the pilot's seat. Carlos was conscious, but blood was flowing from a cut on his forehead. Marina, are you okay? Asterisk. I think so, she replied, doing a quick assessment of herself. Headache, some cuts, but nothing that seemed serious. Roberto? Asterisk. Silence from the back seat. Asterisk. Marina turned with difficulty and saw Roberto unconscious, a bloodstain on his shirt. Her medical instinct took control immediately. Asterisk. Carlos, can you move? She asked while unbuckling her seatbelt. Asterisk. I think so. My left leg is hurting a lot, but I can move my toes. Asterisk. Marina managed to crawl to Roberto and checked his vital signs. Strong pulse, regular breathing, but there was a deep cut on his right arm that was bleeding profusely. Asterisk. He's alive, but I need to stop this bleeding, Marina said, tearing part of her own shirt to make an improvised tourniquet. Asterisk. Carlos managed to get out of the pilot's seat, limping visibly. The radio is dead. We're going to have to get out of here and try to signal rescue teams. Asterisk. First we need to take care of the injuries, Marina replied, applying pressure to Roberto's cut. Do you have a first aid kit in the plane? Asterisk. I had one. Don't know where it is now. Asterisk. Roberto groaned and slowly opened his eyes. What happened? Asterisk. We crashed, my friend, Carlos replied. But we're alive. Asterisk. Roberto tried to sit up and grimaced in pain. My arm. Asterisk. You have a deep cut, but you'll be fine, Marina said, finishing the improvised bandage. Can you move? Asterisk. Roberto carefully tested his limbs. Yes, I think so. Where are we? Asterisk. Carlos looked through the wreckage of the windshield. In the middle of the Amazon rainforest, far from any civilization. We're going to have to find water, shelter, and a way to signal our location. Asterisk. Marina looked around the plane's wreckage. The reality of their situation began to sink in. They were lost in one of the planet's most hostile regions, injured, without adequate supplies, and with no form of communication. Asterisk. How long do you think it will take until someone finds us? Marina asked. Asterisk. Carlos and Roberto exchanged a somber look. Asterisk. It depends, Carlos said finally. If we can signal our location, and if the search teams can locate us, maybe a few days. Asterisk. And if we can't? Marina asked, though she already knew the answer. Asterisk. Then we'll have to find our own way back to civilization, Roberto replied. And that could take weeks. The sun was setting when the three survivors finally managed to completely exit the plane's wreckage. The forest around them was immersed in a symphony of sounds, crickets, frogs, nocturnal birds, and unidentified noises that made Marina shiver. Asterisk. Roberto, despite the injury to his arm, naturally assumed leadership. First thing we need to do is find water. Without water, we won't last 2 days in this heat. Asterisk. Carlos limped visibly, but insisted on helping. I managed to save this from the wreckage, he said, showing a small emergency backpack. It has some cereal bars, a lighter, a small knife, and a signaling mirror. Asterisk Marina checked her own belongings. I have some basic medications in my backpack, antibiotics, painkillers, bandaging material, and a water bottle, but it only has about 500 milliliters. Asterisk that won't last even a day for 3 people, Roberto said, examining the surrounding vegetation. But listen, do you hear that? Asterisk all 3 fell silent. In the middle of the forest sounds, there was a soft but constant noise, the sound of running water. Asterisk a stream. Roberto smiled for the first time since the crash. It can't be very far. Asterisk they followed the sound through the dense vegetation, Roberto clearing the way with Carlos's knife. With each step, Marina was impressed by the forest's density. Vines hung like ropes. Enormous roots created natural obstacles, and the humidity was so intense that their clothes were already soaked with sweat. Asterisk watch out for the ants, Roberto warned, pointing to a trail of leaf-cutter ants crossing their path. And stay away from any plants you don't know. Many are poisonous. Asterisk after 20 minutes of difficult walking, they found the stream, a small creek of crystal clear water, running between moss-covered stones. Asterisk thank God. Marina sighed, kneeling by the bank. Asterisk wait. Roberto grabbed her arm. Don't drink yet. It needs to be boiled first, or at least use purification tablets if you have them. Asterisk I have some purification tablets, Marina said, searching in her backpack. But how many do we have? Asterisk 10 tablets. Each one purifies 1 liter of water. She replied after checking. Asterisk Carlos did the math quickly. That gives us water for 3. For days maximum. We're going to have to learn to boil water or find another solution. Asterisk while waiting for the tablets to take effect, Roberto began collecting materials to make a shelter. It's going to rain tonight, he said, observing the clouds forming. And when it rains in the Amazon, it's like the sky is falling. Asterisk how do you know? Marina asked. Asterisk I was born here. I know the signs. Look how the birds are behaving. How the wind changed direction. We have maybe 2 hours before the rain starts. Asterisk they worked quickly to build a basic shelter using branches, palm leaves, and vines. Carlos, despite his injured leg, helped as he could, while Marina organized her medical supplies and took inventory of what they had. Asterisk food for 2 days if we ration well, she reported. Purified water for 3 days. Basic medications. What about you? Asterisk I have experience in the forest, Roberto said. I know which plants are edible, how to make fish traps, how to navigate by the stars. But, he hesitated. Asterisk, but what? Carlos asked. Asterisk, but I've never been lost for this long. I always had a boat, or knew exactly where I was. Here, without references. It's going to be difficult. Asterisk as Roberto had predicted, the rain began at nightfall. It wasn't ordinary rain. It was a deluge. Water fell with such force it seemed like someone was pouring buckets from the sky. The improvised shelter offered partial protection, but everyone got soaked within minutes. Asterisk my God. Marina shouted over the rain's noise. How do you live with this? Asterisk you get used to it. Roberto shouted back. But look on the bright side. Now we have plenty of water. Asterisk they positioned improvised containers to collect rainwater, ensuring an additional supply. But the rain brought other problems. The temperature dropped drastically, and everyone began shivering uncontrollably. Asterisk we need fire, Carlos said, his teeth chattering, or we'll die of hypothermia. Asterisk impossible to make fire in this rain, Roberto replied. We'll have to warm each other up. Asterisk it was a long and miserable night. The 3 huddled in the small shelter, sharing body heat and trying to sleep despite the cold, humidity, and terrifying sounds of the nocturnal forest. Asterisk Marina had never experienced such complete darkness. In the city, there was always some light. Streetlights, windows, cars. Here, when she closed her eyes, there was no difference between having her eyes open or closed. Asterisk what's that sound? She whispered when she heard a distant roar. Asterisk jaguar, Roberto replied calmly. But it's far away. They usually avoid humans. Asterisk usually. Asterisk usually. Asterisk around 3 in the morning. The rain finally stopped. The relief was immense, but was soon replaced by a new problem: mosquitoes, thousands of them, attracted by body heat and the carbon dioxide they exhaled. Asterisk, this is unbearable, Marina groaned, trying to protect herself from insects that seemed to penetrate any barrier. Asterisk, you'll have to get used to it, Roberto said, clearly suffering too. And hope they're not malaria mosquitoes. Asterisk, malaria. Marina sat up, alarmed. Asterisk, this region has malaria, yellow fever, dengue. That's why I always use repellent when I come here. But our repellent was in the plane. Asterisk, Marina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. As a doctor, she knew exactly how dangerous these diseases could be, especially without access to proper treatment. Asterisk, we have to get out of here as soon as possible. She said. Asterisk, I agree, Carlos replied. But first we need to figure out where we are and where to go. Asterisk, when the sun finally rose, all three were exhausted, soaked, and covered with mosquito bites. But they were alive. Asterisk, first thing, Roberto said, coming out of the shelter and stretching. We're going to make fire and dry our clothes. Then we'll try to orient ourselves and make a plan. Asterisk, making fire proved more difficult than expected. Everything was wet from the previous night's rain. Roberto tried various techniques: wood, friction, sparks with stones, even using Marina's glasses to concentrate sunlight. Nothing worked. Asterisk, wait, Carlos said suddenly. The lighter. I still have the lighter. Asterisk, the small plastic lighter had survived the crash and the rain. With it, they finally managed to light a small fire using dry leaves that Roberto found protected under fallen logs. Asterisk, I never thought I'd be so happy to see fire, Marina said, extending her hands to warm up. Asterisk, while their clothes dried, Roberto climbed a tall tree to try to orient himself. When he came down, his expression was somber. Asterisk, bad news, he said. I can't see any known references. No major rivers, no roads, no buildings. We're in the middle of nowhere. Asterisk, and the good news? Carlos asked. Asterisk, the good news is that I saw smoke in the distance. In the northeast direction. Could be an indigenous village or maybe river dwellers. Asterisk, how far? Marina asked. Asterisk, hard to say. In the forest. Distances are deceiving. Could be 5 kilometers. Could be 20. Asterisk, Carlos looked at his injured leg. I don't know if I can walk 20 kilometers in this condition. Asterisk, we'll try, Roberto said. But first, we need to prepare better. We'll make spears to protect ourselves, collect more water, and I'll try to catch some fish in this stream. Asterisk, the rest of the morning was spent in preparations. Roberto demonstrated how to make sharp spears using branches and Carlos's knife. Marina organized a portable medical kit with her most essential supplies. Carlos, despite his injured leg, helped collect water and keep the fire burning. Asterisk, one important thing, Roberto said while they worked. In the forest, never separate. Always stay where you can see each other. It's very easy to get lost here. Even just a few meters away. Asterisk, around noon, they were ready to leave. Each carried an improvised spear, a water bottle, and a small portion of food. Roberto had managed to catch 2 small fish in the stream, which they quickly roasted over the fire. Asterisk, will follow the stream for now, Roberto explained. Streams always lead to bigger rivers, and bigger rivers lead to people. Asterisk, and if it doesn't lead anywhere? Marina asked. Asterisk, then we'll have to improvise. The second day in the forest began with a terrifying discovery. Marina woke up with intense pain in her leg and, upon examination, found a finger-sized leech attached to her calf. Asterisk, Roberto. She screamed, waking the other two. There's something on my leg. Asterisk, Roberto examined the situation calmly. Leech, don't panic. It's normal around here. But you can't just pull it off, or the head will stay attached and could get infected. Asterisk, carefully. He used the lighter to heat the knife tip and gently touched the leech, which immediately released. There, it'll bleed a little, but it's not dangerous. Asterisk, Marina looked at the slimy creature with disgust. How many more of these things are around here? Asterisk, many, Roberto replied honestly. Leeches, ticks, chiggers, larvae that burrow into skin. The forest is full of parasites. Asterisk, are you trying to scare me? Asterisk, I'm trying to prepare you for reality. The more you know about the dangers, the better you can protect yourselves. Asterisk, they resumed their journey following the stream, but soon discovered that walking in the Amazon rainforest was much more difficult than they had imagined. The vegetation was so dense that sometimes they had to crawl under low branches or hack their way through tangles of vines. Asterisk, Carlos was clearly suffering. His injured leg made each step torture, but he refused to admit weakness. I'm fine, he insisted whenever Marina or Roberto asked. Asterisk, around noon, they stopped to rest and eat. Roberto had collected some fruits he recognized as safe, small red fruits that tasted sour but were nutritious. Asterisk, it's not much, he said, distributing the fruits, but it'll give us energy. Asterisk, it was then that they heard the sound. Asterisk, a low, deep roar that seemed to come from all directions. All three froze, looking around nervously. Asterisk, jaguar, Marina whispered. Asterisk, Roberto shook his head slowly. No, jaguars don't make that sound. That's... He stopped, trying to identify the noise. Asterisk, the sound came again, closer this time. It was like a roar, but also like a grunt, something Marina had never heard before. Asterisk, tapir, Roberto said finally. It's a tapir, large animal, but herbivorous, won't attack us unless it feels threatened. Asterisk, how large? Carlos asked. Asterisk, can reach 300 kilograms. Asterisk, they remained motionless for several minutes until the sound moved away. When they finally felt safe to continue, Marina realized her hands were shaking. Asterisk, it's okay, Roberto said, noticing her nervousness. The forest seems scary, but most animals are more afraid of us than we are of them. Asterisk, most. Asterisk, most. Asterisk, in the afternoon, they encountered their first real obstacle. The stream they were following emptied into a much larger river, but between them and the river was a swamp, a flooded area covered with aquatic vegetation and deep mud. Asterisk, can we go around it? Marina asked, looking at the muddy expanse. Asterisk, Roberto studied the area carefully. It would be a detour of several hours, and we don't know if we'll find a better passage. I think we have to cross it. Asterisk, that looks dangerous, Carlos observed. Asterisk, it is dangerous. There could be caimans, water snakes, and the mud could be deeper than it looks. But if we want to reach the river before nightfall, it's our best option. Asterisk, they decided to try. Roberto went first, testing each step with his improvised spear. Marina followed in the middle, and Carlos brought up the rear, limping but determined. Asterisk, the first few meters were relatively easy. The mud only reached their ankles, and the aquatic vegetation offered additional support. But as they advanced, the situation worsened. Asterisk, the mud is getting deeper, Roberto warned. Now it's knee-high. Asterisk, Marina felt something slippery brush against her leg and screamed. There's something in the water. Asterisk, calm down, Roberto said. Probably just a fish. Keep moving. But slowly. Asterisk, they were in the middle of the swamp when Carlos screamed, my leg, I'm sinking. Asterisk, Marina turned and saw that Carlos had stepped into an area of softer mud and was sinking rapidly. The mud already reached his waist and continued rising. Asterisk, don't move. Roberto shouted, the more you struggle, the more you'll sink. Asterisk, Roberto quickly returned, using his spear for support. Marina, help me. We'll use the spears for leverage. Asterisk, working together, they managed to position the spears under Carlos's arms and slowly pull him out of the treacherous mud. When they finally got him out, Carlos was covered in mud from the waist down and trembling with exhaustion. Asterisk, thank you, he gasped. I thought I was going to drown in mud. Asterisk, we're not out of this yet, Roberto said. Let's continue, but more carefully. Asterisk, the rest of the crossing was a nightmare. With each step, they feared sinking into the mud or encountering some aquatic predator. When they finally reached the other side, everyone was exhausted and covered in mud. Asterisk, but the river they found was worth the effort. It was much larger than the stream, maybe 50 meters wide, and its waters flowed with considerable force. Asterisk, this is a tributary of the Tapajos, Roberto said, studying the river. If we follow it downstream, we'll eventually find people. Asterisk, eventually? Marina asked. Asterisk, could be tomorrow, could be next week. Depends on how lucky we are. Asterisk they set up camp on the riverbank, taking advantage of a small sandy beach. Roberto managed to catch some small fish using an improvised spear, while Marina tended to Carlos's wounds and checked the condition of her own injuries. Asterisk how's your leg? She asked Carlos while examining the wound. Asterisk hurting a lot, and I think it's getting infected. Asterisk Marina examined the wound carefully. There were signs of infection, redness, swelling, and yellowish discharge. I'll give you antibiotics, but our supply is limited. Asterisk how much do we have? Asterisk enough pills for 5 days, if we only use them for serious cases. Asterisk Carlos nodded grimly. And if the infection gets worse? Asterisk Marina didn't answer, but everyone knew. The response: without proper medical treatment, a serious infection could be fatal. Asterisk that night, while taking turns keeping watch, Marina reflected on their situation. 3 days ago, she was in her comfortable apartment in Sao Paulo, worried about trivial things like traffic and bills. Now, she was fighting for her life in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Depending on skills she never knew she possessed. Asterisk Roberto, she whispered during her watch shift. Do you think we'll get out of this? Asterisk Roberto, who was awake despite it not being his turn to watch, considered the question carefully. Honestly, I don't know. We have food for 1 more day, maybe 2. Water isn't a problem as long as we're near the river. But Carlos is getting worse, and we don't know when we'll find help. Asterisk, and if we don't find any, asterisk then we'll have to keep trying. The alternative is giving up, and that's not an option. Asterisk Marina nodded, admiring the guide's determination. How do you manage to stay calm? Asterisk experience. And because panicking won't help us, in the forest, those who keep a cool head have better chances of survival. Asterisk the next morning, they woke up to a discovery that changed everything. During the night, Carlos had developed a high fever and was delirious. Asterisk he's very bad. Marina said after examining the pilot, the infection has spread. I need stronger antibiotics, and he needs rest. Asterisk we can't stop here, Roberto said. If we stop, we'll all die. Asterisk, and if we continue, he might die. Asterisk Roberto looked at the river, then at Carlos, who was muttering incoherently. Then we'll have to improvise. I'll make a raft. We can put Carlos on it and let the current take us downstream. Asterisk is that safe? Asterisk nothing we're doing is safe, but it's our best option. Building the raft took the entire morning. Roberto used fallen logs, vines, and his experience as a river dweller to create a rudimentary but functional vessel. Marina took care of Carlos, who was getting worse. His fever had risen, and he was drifting in and out of consciousness. Asterisk I don't know if he can take much more, Marina said, checking Carlos's pulse. His pulse is rapid and irregular. Asterisk he'll make it, Roberto said with determination. He has to make it. Asterisk around noon, the raft was ready. It was primitive, just some logs tied together with vines. But it floated. Roberto did a quick test and decided it would work. Asterisk we'll put Carlos in the middle, where it's most stable, he instructed. Marina, you stay with him. I'll guide the raft with this pole. Asterisk they carefully placed Carlos on the improvised raft. The pilot was semi-conscious, mumbling incomprehensible words. Marina positioned herself beside him, holding a water bottle and the last antibiotic pills. Asterisk ready? Roberto asked, positioning himself at the back of the raft with a long pole for steering. Asterisk Marina nodded, though she didn't feel ready at all. Let's go. Asterisk Roberto pushed the raft into the river, and immediately they were caught by the current. The sensation was both liberating and terrifying. They were finally moving quickly, but they were also completely at the river's mercy. Asterisk hold on tight, Roberto shouted when they passed through a series of rocks that created small but dangerous rapids. Asterisk the raft rocked violently, and Marina had to grab Carlos to prevent him from falling into the water. Cold river water soaked all of them but the improvised vessel held together. Asterisk is everything okay? Roberto asked when they passed the rapids. Asterisk yes, but Carlos is getting worse, Marina replied, checking the pilot's condition. He's very hot and not responding. Asterisk they continued downstream for hours. The landscape constantly changed. Sometimes the river was wide and calm. Other times it narrowed and the current became stronger. Roberto used all his experience to navigate the obstacles, but it was clear he was also worried. Asterisk look, Marina suddenly shouted, pointing to the right bank of the river, smoke. Asterisk Roberto looked in the direction she pointed and saw a thin column of smoke rising among the trees. Could be a village or river dwellers. Asterisk he began paddling desperately toward the bank, fighting against the current that wanted to take them downstream. Marina helped as she could, using her hands to paddle. Asterisk we're going to make it, Roberto shouted, his muscles tense from the effort. Asterisk they managed to reach the bank just as the raft began to fall apart. The vines holding the logs together were coming loose, and the improvised vessel wouldn't last much longer. Asterisk help, Marina shouted toward the smoke. Help, someone help us, asterisk her voice echoed through the forest. But there was no immediate response. Roberto helped carry Carlos to the bank, and the three remained on the small sandy beach, exhausted and desperate. Asterisk I'll investigate where the smoke is coming from, Roberto said. You stay here with Carlos. Asterisk no, Marina protested. You said never to separate. Asterisk we have no choice. Carlos can't be moved, and someone needs to go get help. Asterisk Roberto disappeared into the vegetation, leaving Marina alone with unconscious Carlos. She had never felt so helpless. The pilot was clearly dying. She was at the limit of her strength, and now she was alone in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Asterisk 15 minutes passed like an eternity. Marina constantly checked Carlos's pulse, which was getting weaker and weaker. She began preparing for the worst when she heard voices. Asterisk here. They're here. It was Roberto's voice, but he wasn't alone. Asterisk 3 men emerged from the vegetation along with Roberto. They were local river dwellers, an older man and 2 young men, all with skin bronzed by the sun and simple but practical clothes. Asterisk my God, said the older man, approaching Carlos. This man is very bad. Asterisk he needs a hospital, Marina said desperately. He has a serious infection. Asterisk the nearest hospital is in Santarem, said one of the young men. But we have a motorboat. We can get there in a few hours. Asterisk please, Marina begged. He'll die if we don't get help. Asterisk of course we'll help, said the older man. I'm Juo, and these are my sons Pedro and Miguel. Are you the survivors from the plane that crashed? Asterisk you know about the plane? Roberto asked. Surprised. Asterisk of course. Search teams have been looking for you for 3 days. Let's get you to our boat right now. Asterisk what followed was a blur of activity. The river dwellers carefully carried Carlos to their boat, an aluminum vessel, with an outboard motor. Marina and Roberto followed them, barely believing they had finally found help. Asterisk how long to the hospital? Marina asked as the boat accelerated downstream. Asterisk 3 hours, if we don't have problems. Juo replied, but I already called on the radio. They'll be waiting. Asterisk Marina held Carlos's hand during the entire trip. The pilot was unconscious, but still breathing. She administered the last antibiotics she had and did everything she could to keep him stable. Asterisk Roberto sat beside her, finally allowing exhaustion to show on his face. We made it, he said simply. Asterisk not yet, Marina replied, looking at Carlos. We'll only have made it when he's safe in the hospital. Asterisk when they finally reached Santarem, an ambulance was waiting at the port. Paramedics immediately took over Carlos's care, connecting him to medical equipment and administering intravenous medications. Asterisk will he be okay? Marina asked the paramedic. Asterisk you got here just in time, the man replied. A few more hours and it would have been too late. Asterisk at the hospital, Marina and Roberto were examined by doctors. Apart from dehydration, exhaustion, and multiple minor injuries, both were in surprisingly good condition. Asterisk you were very lucky, said the doctor who examined them. 3 days in the Amazon rainforest without proper preparation. Many people wouldn't survive. Asterisk it wasn't luck, Marina said, looking at Roberto. It was teamwork. Asterisk 3 days later, Carlos was out of danger. The infection had been controlled with intravenous antibiotics, and he was recovering well. When he finally woke up, his first words were, "Marina, Roberto, are you okay?" Asterisk, "We're all fine." Marina replied, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We made it, Carlos. All of us made it." Asterisk, the story of their survival spread quickly. Journalists wanted to interview them, and they became a small media sensation. But for the 3 survivors, the real reward was simply being alive. Asterisk, "You know, what impresses me most," Carlos said during one of the interviews, "it wasn't the forest that almost killed us. It was our own lack of preparation. The forest is dangerous, but it also gave us everything we needed to survive: water, food, materials. For shelter, we just needed to know how to use those resources." Asterisk, Marina agreed. "This experience completely changed me. I learned that I'm stronger than I imagined, but I also learned to respect nature in a way I never had before." Asterisk, Roberto, who had become a local hero, was more philosophical. "The forest isn't our enemy, it's our teacher. Those who respect it and learn from it can survive. Those who disrespect it, well, you saw what happens." Asterisk, 6 months later, Marina returned to the Amazon, but this time properly prepared. She established a medical clinic in a river community, using her experience to help people who live in the forest. Asterisk, Carlos continued flying, but now with much more complete emergency equipment, and always with detailed flight plans. Asterisk, Roberto expanded his tourism business, but now specialized in teaching forest survival techniques, ensuring that other tourists would never go through what they had experienced. Asterisk, the 3 remained close friends, forever united by the experience that almost killed them, but also taught them the true value of life, friendship, and human determination. Asterisk, and on quiet nights, when they gathered for dinner, they sometimes talked about those 3 days in the forest, not with horror, but with strange gratitude, because it was there, in the middle of the Amazon's green hell, that they discovered who they really were and what they were capable of. Have you ever been in a life-or-death survival situation? Share your most terrifying adventure in the comments. Like if you'd survive 72 hours in the Amazon, and subscribe for more incredible true survival stories.